He's awake, he's awake. Prefect Zhang, under Shinlang's treatment, finally regained consciousness. At this moment, he weakly looked at his little grandson, safe and sound beside him. A relieved smile appeared on his tense face. Young Master Shin, he said, thank you for saving me once again. This time, you saved the lives of 3 generations of my family. I owe you more and more. At this time, Shinlang, who had just entered the room, saw that Zhang Chang's complexion was good after waking up, so he said to Ning Jia, who was beside him, Your Highness, the eldest princess, please take little Zhang Yun to rest outside for a bit. Hearing this, Ning Jia nodded slightly, then silently led Zhang Yun out by the hand. After Ning Jia left, Zhang Chong asked, Young Master Shin, what are your plans next? Shinlang smiled upon hearing this question, and then said, as if joking, very simple, send the crown prince and the 3rd prince to meet the late sovereign. As soon as these words were spoken, Zhang Sun, who was behind him carrying medicine for his father, his hand trembled violently, almost dropping the medicine bowl. At this moment, he froze on the spot, caught in a dilemma. Should I have gone out with Princess Ning Jia just now? He thought. But speaking of this young Master Shin, he's truly formidable, not to mention his glorious achievements before. Just look at the present situation. He single-handedly gathered the Chan Kingdom's army, then wiped out the Su clan's main force. Although Su Nan's rebels are not yet pacified, the spearhead is already aimed at the future crown prince. Seeing this, Zhang Chong merely glanced coolly at Zhang Sun and paid him no mind. After some deliberation, he said, although His Highness the crown prince has some shortcomings, he can at least be considered a capable young lord. If he ascends to the throne in the future, it would be relatively beneficial for the stability of the Yu kingdom. Shinlang sneered after hearing this. Lord Zhang, I know you are considered part of the crown prince's faction, but he even wants to steal my wife. Can I still tolerate this? But then again, if I weren't concerned about his status, his grave mound would probably be 3 feet high by now. Hearing this, Zhang Chong instantly looked embarrassed, but still braced himself and tried to persuade. It is certainly wrong for His Highness the crown prince to have such thoughts, but after this battle with Su Nan, I believe he will definitely give up this unrealistic notion. Besides, you and Princess Ningyan have a close relationship now. Perhaps you might even become half a son-in-law to the sovereign in the future. Who knows? Before he finished speaking, Shinlang laughed out loud again. Lord Zhang, do you know that the crown prince has already made a move against my Qin family? He sent Kutuhuan to assassinate my father-in-law. Such ruthless methods to eliminate everyone. Do you think I can still tolerate it? As soon as these words were spoken, Zhang Chong abruptly sat up from the couch, his eyes filled with shock. Kutuhuan is actually the crown prince's man? Looking at Shinlang's determined eyes, Zhang Chong helplessly fell back onto the pillow. It seemed the conflict between these two had reached a life-or-death stage. As a member of the crown prince's faction, this brand can never be changed, but he absolutely did not want to be an enemy of Shinlang. Shinlang looked at Zhang Chong's troubled expression and smiled. Lord Zhang, you have made a great contribution this time. His Majesty might directly appoint you as the central commander of Western Celestial Province. At that time, a tall tree attracts the wind. Wanting to remain untainted will likely be impossible. Zhang Chong closed his eyes and remained silent for a long time after hearing this. Only after a while did he sigh and say, hasn't the mighty Duke always wanted me to go to Glamorous Province to serve as the subordinate commander? Then I shall go and take up the post. Hearing this, Shinlang raised an eyebrow and reminded him that Glamorous Province is merely a special administrative prefecture with only 3 commanderies. Its area is less than half the size of Western Celestial Province. It's a rank lower than Central Commander. Zhang Chong raised his hand, interrupting him. At least this way, I won't have to be an enemy of young Master Shin. It's just that, in this way, I will become a traitor to the Crown Prince's faction. Just as Shinlang was about to say something more, an announcement came from outside the door. Lord Prefect, Lord Liang, the Central Commander of Western Celestial Province, is here. Hearing this, Zhang Chong and Shinlang exchanged a look and instantly understood what the other was thinking. It seemed Liang Yongnian had sensed his own crisis and was eager to probe the situation. Just then, Liang Yongnian walked into the room with a concerned expression. Seeing this, Zhang Chong immediately pretended to struggle to sit up and shouted, Quick, quick, help me up. I must go pay my respects to Commander Liang. Liang Yongnian hurriedly stepped forward to stop him. Lord Zhang, please lie down quickly. You are a hero of the state. How can you rise to salute me when you are seriously injured and haven't recovered? After all, it was Shinlang's first time meeting Liang Yongnian. At this moment, he silently stood aside and began to observe this person. This Liang Yongnian is a Su faction official. Back then, when the sovereign ordered him to lead troops to suppress Su Nan's rebels, he feigned illness and refused several times. Although Su Nan's rebellion is now in a stalemate, he most likely still hopes for the Su clan to win. After all, if the Su clan loses this battle, he will suffer greatly. While Shinlang was observing Liang Yongnian, little did he know that this fellow was also secretly sizing him up out of the corner of his eye. Meeting Shinlang for the first time, Liang Yongnian also felt very surprised by Shinlang. The one who helped Zhang Chong defeat the Su clan's main force turned out to be a seemingly weak pretty boy. At this moment, although his heart was already gritting its teeth with hatred for Zhang Chong and Shinlang, he still forced a concerned expression on his face. He quickly stepped forward and pressed down on Zhang Chong, who was trying to get up. After some warm words of comfort, his gaze turned to Shinlang Shinlang, who was standing nearby. This must be young Master Shin, I presume? Hearing this, Shinlang was first taken aback, then his lips twitched into a faint, ambiguous smile as a response. Seeing this, although the smile on Liang Yongnian's face did not diminish, his heart was already surging with anger. Shinlang, you are merely a minor city lord. How dare you be so disrespectful in front of me, a central commander? I'll remember this. One day, I will definitely settle this score with you properly. Suppressing the anger in his heart, he then turned his head and said to Zhang Chong, when I heard of Su Nan's rebellion, I was truly horrified. I wanted to immediately assemble troops to come and support Lord Zhang in quelling the rebellion. Unfortunately, my uncooperative body suddenly fell gravely ill, and I almost lost my life. Now that my body is slightly better, I quickly led an army of 5,000 to provide support. Before he finished speaking, Shinlang, who was sighing nearby, almost burst out laughing. Still 5,000 troops? I estimate, Commander Liang, even if you brought all the soldiers from your entire yamen, you wouldn't have this number. And Zhang Chong, naturally, also knew this full well. After glancing at Shinlang, he cupped his hands in a salute and said, Commander Liang is unparalleled in loyalty and righteousness. Since you have already led your troops here, the defense of White Knight County will henceforth rely on Commander Liang. Hearing this, Liang Yongnian hurriedly declined. No, Lord Zhang is a renowned general of his generation. White Knight County still needs you to preside over it. Don't worry, the 5,000 soldiers I brought will all be under your command from now on. Just as he said this, a burst of hurried footsteps suddenly came from outside the door. Then the door was violently pushed open. Jing Tuo rushed in with an anxious face and shouted, Lord Zhang, I have arrived late. Are you alright? Seeing this, Zhang Chong gave him a feigned weak smile. I am fine now. This time, thanks to young Master Shin's timely assistance, I managed to survive. Jing Tuo, upon hearing this, strode over to Shinlang, slapped him hard on the shoulder and said, Very good. You fought this battle beautifully, boy. Worthy of being the Jin family's son-in-law. You've brought honor to the mythical turtle Marquis. After that slap from Jing Tuo, Shinlang almost cried. At this moment, he rubbed his swollen and painful shoulder, cursing Jing Tuo inwardly. You old dog, you're clearly targeting me deliberately. You know you're in the wrong, yet you're still posturing here. Damn you. However, Jing Tuo seemed completely oblivious to his fiery gaze. He turned and bowed to Liang Yongnian, then sat down nonchalantly, not forgetting to boast about leading 16,000 troops to pursue Su Zhan and easily capturing Snowbright City, his glorious achievement. Listening to Jing Tuo's boasting, Shinlang couldn't help but show a look of disdain. If you were really that capable, why would White Knight County have been left isolated and helpless for so long? Although the voice was soft, this sentence still clearly fell into the ears of the three men. Jing Tuo's expression changed slightly. Then he hurriedly changed the subject and asked Liang Yongnian, Commander Liang, how many men did you bring this time? Liang Yongnian replied, only 5,000 troops. Jing Tuo nodded and calculated. So, adding Zhang Chang's forces, we will have a coalition army of 30,000. Su Nan has just suffered a major defeat. I'm afraid his remaining forces are less than 5,000. This is a good opportunity for us to press our advantage. Liang Yongnian hesitated. That's true, but the Marquis of Distant Guard's mansion and castle are as strong as gold and soup, very difficult to attack. Hearing this, Zhang Chong also looked at Jing Tuo and gestured, Count of pacifying the West, you are a master of military strategy. Do you have any good plans? Jing Tuo pondered for a moment and then said, although Su Nan's main force has been eliminated, his stronghold still remains. This final battle is crucial. As the saying goes, a snake cannot move without a head. I think our allied forces must first select a commander-in-chief. Once this proposal was made, everyone present was stunned. Even Shinlang was extremely surprised by his idea. You previously feigned compliance while disobeying the sovereign's orders, not following them. You watched Zhang Chong die and almost caused a catastrophe, nearly bringing disaster upon the Yu Kingdom. Now that you are facing imminent disaster, shouldn't you be begging me and Zhang Chong to give you a hand in this great merit of suppressing Su Nan? You still want to usurp the host's role and seize control? At this moment, Liang Yongnian slapped his thigh and agreed. That makes sense. If the name is not right, the words will not be heeded. In this crucial battle to annihilate Su Nan, our allied forces indeed need to elect a commander-in-chief. At this time, Jing Tuo looked at Liang Yongnian and smiled. Lord Liang, as the central commander of Western Celestial Province, you hold the third rank in a hereditary earldom. In terms of official rank and peerage, no one surpasses you. I nominate Commander Liang as the commander-in-chief of the allied forces. Liang Yongnian waved his hand hastily after hearing this. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I am a civil official. Although I hold a military post, I have never truly commanded troops. How can I bear such a heavy responsibility? When it comes to military campaigns, who doesn't know the prestige of the Count of pacifying the West? You are battle-hardened and have over 10,000 elite soldiers under your command. This position of commander-in-chief is yours and yours alone. Looking at the hypocritical and modest faces of these two, Shinlang almost burst out laughing. The way these two were going back and forth, it was clear they were putting on a show. Usually, they cowered before the rebel army, but now they were fighting fiercely for power and profit. Truly typical warlord behavior. However, at this moment, Shinlang began to quickly analyze their intentions in his mind. Jing Tuo, holding a large army, delayed rescue rescue. Liang Yongnian kept his troops inactive, watching the crisis unfold. These two must have long been considered criminals awaiting punishment in the sovereign's eyes. Their current tacit cooperation clearly shows they want to use the position of commander-in-chief to seize the primary credit for annihilating Sunan. As long as they achieve this monumental merit, even if they had many past wrongdoings, the sovereign would have to hold his nose and pardon them. At this moment, Liang Yongnian suddenly said, Prefect Zhang, City Lord Shen, in your opinion, General Jin Tuo is most skilled in military affairs. Shouldn't this position of commander-in-chief of the allied forces be his and his alone? However, before Zhang Chong could answer, Shinlang spoke directly. I don't think it's appropriate. The smile on Liang Yongnian's face froze instantly. Are you deliberately undermining me and slapping my face, boy? Seeing this, Jin Tuo quickly spoke up, laughing to smooth things over. Yes, young Master Shin has sharp eyes. What he says is true. I'm a crude person. How could I bear such a heavy responsibility? It's still most appropriate for Commander Liang to take the post. Hearing this, Shinlang shook his head and said, I don't think Lord Liang is suitable either. These successive rejections made both their faces turn very ugly. At this moment, Liang Yongnian's gaze swept over Zhang Chong, and he suddenly understood. Then his tone changed, and he said, the Battle of White Knight County, Lord Zhang fought it beautifully. Although his official rank is a bit low, it's not impossible for him to be the commander-in-chief. It's just that Lord Zhang is now ill in bed, I'm afraid. However, before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by Shinlang. No, Lord Liang, I think you've misunderstood. What I mean is, it's most appropriate for me to be the commander-in-chief of this allied army. As soon as these words were spoken, even Zhang Chong, who was drinking medicine on the couch, was so shocked that he spat out the medicine in his mouth. Shinlang also looked over with some embarrassment. Lord Zhang, we are in the same boat. Please give me some face. Zhang Chong hurriedly nodded at him in apology. It's mainly because this news was too sudden. I really couldn't control myself. At this time, Liang Yongnian glared at Shinlang with a furious expression. You brat, do you even understand the rules of officialdom? He couldn't help but curse inwardly. You're merely a 6th-rank city lord. You luckily won one battle, and now you dare to covet the position of commander-in-chief? However, Shinlang completely ignored his murderous gaze, raised an eyebrow and retorted, what? Judging by Lord Liang's meaning, am I not qualified to be this commander-in-chief? These words immediately left Liang Yongnian speechless for a moment. The instant Jing Tuo and he made eye contact, they both saw surprise in each other's eyes. This kid's skin is really thick. For a moment, they really couldn't find words to refute him. After a moment of silence, Jing Tuo suddenly turned his gaze to Zhang Chong. Lord Zhang is a veteran of many battles. Why don't you say a fair word? In fact, they all knew very well in their hearts that among the four present, as long as one person could gain the support of half, the choice of commander-in-chief would be settled. However, Zhang Chong's next sentence directly shocked the two of them. In my opinion, young Master Shin remained calm and composed on the battlefield and turned the tide in the Battle of White Knight County. With such ability, he is capable of bearing the position of commander-in-chief. Once these words were spoken, Liang Yongnian and Jing Tuo also understood Zhang Chong's intentions. This was to completely tear off all pretenses and put them both to death. Since it had come to this, Liang Yongnian no longer cared about face. With a gloomy face, he stood up directly and said, Prefect Zhang, you actually approve of Shinlang, this wet behind the ears brat, fooling around? Could it be that such a major matter as suppressing Sunan's rebellion is child's play in your eyes? Or, as I said before, Count Jing Tuo is a veteran of many battles. Only he can bear this heavy responsibility. Hearing this, Jing Tuo no longer feigned refusal. He directly interjected, in that case, for the sake of the overall situation of the Yu Kingdom, then I nominate myself as the commander-in-chief of the allied forces. From today onwards, the White Knight County battlefield will be entirely under my command. At this point, Zhang Chong closed his eyes and said no more. There was no way around it. After all, who made these two people's official ranks higher? If they insisted on seizing command like this, he couldn't do anything about it. At this moment, Jing Tuo shouted loudly, City Lord of Distant Guard City, Shinlang, hear my order. I, the commander, appoint your army as the vanguard. Set out immediately to attack the Marquis of Distant Guard's mansion. Shinlang sneered upon hearing this, leisurely sat back in his chair and said word by word, I am not going. As his voice fell, Jing Tuo instantly became furious, pointing at Shinlang and yelling sharply, Shinlang, military orders are like mountains. Do you really think I, the commander, cannot kill you? You should know that those who disobey military orders, even if I kill you, you die in vain. Shinlang couldn't help but sigh inwardly after hearing this. This Jing Tuo is Jing Hongxian's father, and also Jin Hai's father-in-law. I was thinking of showing some mercy because of this relationship, but since you, Jing Tuo, have said you want to kill me, then I can only fight back. Thinking of this, he said directly, Commander Zheng, I have no soldiers or generals under my command. What can I use to be the vanguard? Jing Tuo snorted coldly. Are your 10,000 cavalrymen just for show? Shinlang shrugged. That's Aranana's army. How could I possibly command them? Commander Zheng, you go try. This reply left Jing Tuo speechless. Gritting his teeth, he said again, don't you still have an army of 200 men? Hearing this, Shinlang's face completely darkened. You want me to lead 200 men to charge? It seems you, Jing Tuo, really wish I were dead. After a pause, he replied, Commander Zheng, Jing is joking. These 200 elite soldiers are Princess Ningyan's guards. If you can command them, then you go. Right now, I, the city lord, am a general without an army, and I've also fallen seriously ill. Speaking of which, he suddenly turned his head to look at Liang Yongyan with a faint smile that was not quite a smile. By the way, Lord Liang, when you were bedridden before, what illness did you have? Could I borrow it for use? Hearing this, Liang Yongyan's expression changed dramatically. Don't hit a person in the face. Shinlang, you little beast, you're not just hitting my face, you're clearly rubbing my face on the ground. Just then, Jing Tuo suddenly burst out laughing. Lord Liang, have you seen it? This fellow, in fact, wants to monopolize the great merit of destroying Sunan. I didn't expect that the son-in-law of the mythical turtle marquis, for his own selfish desires, would cast aside the great cause of suppressing the rebellion to engage in internal strife when facing a great enemy. It's truly the joke of the century. Then Liang Yongyan also chimed in. Isn't that so? A mere 6th-rank minor official actually dares to try and suppress us 2 counts, truly overestimating his own abilities. Jing Tuo continued to apply pressure. Shinlang, don't think that just because you have a little merit, you can act so presumptuously. Just wait and see. Even without you, Lord Liang and I can lead troops to annihilate Sunan. Liang Yongyan nodded and said, that's right. We want His Majesty to know who is loyal to the affairs of the state, who is greedy for power. Shinlang, just you wait to be impeached. Listening to their exasperated voices, Shinlang slowly picked up his teacup, took a light sip, and said, all right then, I'll just wait here. That nonchalant demeanor infuriated Jing Tuo and Liang Yongyan, their faces turning ashen. The two of them snorted coldly, didn't even say goodbye to Zhang Chong, and directly flit their sleeves and stormed off. After the sound of footsteps faded, Zhang Chong couldn't help but smile and say, young Master Shin, aren't the faces of these two quite interesting? Hearing this, Shinlang, who was peeking out the door, couldn't help but laugh. More than just interesting, it's simply breathtaking. There's no helping it. There are always people constantly refreshing the lower limit of my understanding of shamelessness. It seems that if one wants to do well in officialdom without cultivating a thick skin, it's truly difficult to move even an inch. Zhang Chong smiled and said, young Master Shin, don't these two actually have another layer of sinister intentions? Hearing this, Shinlang closed the door and walked over, saying, so you're saying they want to use the suppression of Sunan to occupy the Marquis of Distant Guard's mansion themselves, thereby replacing him and intimidating the state army? Zhang Chong nodded. That's right, but fortunately, young Master Shin drew a clear line with them in time. Otherwise, our small army would probably have been ruined by them too. A smile played on Shinlang's lips as he said, I was actually worrying about how to crack open this turtle shell, the Marquis of Distant Guard's mansion. Unexpectedly, these two suckers delivered themselves to my door. They will surely race against time to attack the Marquis of Distant Guard's mansion. Next, we don't need to do anything. Just wait here and watch a good show. Just as the Chan Kingdom's commander, Shibutai, led 10,000 cavalry into Western Celestial Province that day, Sunan received news from his spies. At this moment, he was completely unaware that Arutai had been defeated and was still rejoicing that the Chan army had successfully entered Western Celestial Province. But at the same time, he was also wondering, this Arutai had always cherished military power as if it were his life. Previously, no matter how perilous the situation, he had never divided his forces. Why did he suddenly change his strategy this time? It wasn't until the second border battle report was delivered to him that Sunan's pupils instantly constricted. Great Snow Mountain had unexpectedly experienced an avalanche before the Chan forces divided. In a panic, he looked at the previous secret letter. Finally, he realized what was wrong. He roared furiously, relay my order immediately. We must intercept the Chan cavalry led by Shibutai. That night, Sunan stayed awake all night. In the dimly lit study, he sat alone on the couch, waiting with extreme anxiety for new intelligence. At this moment, his heart was constantly praying how he hoped the contents of the battle report were just a false alarm. Suddenly, Suyong stumbled and pushed open the door. My lord, it's bad. Arutai's army encountered an avalanche and their whereabouts are unknown. Arunana has now succeeded as the new Chan king. The 10,000 Chan soldiers who entered Western Celestial Province are enemies. They were brought by Shinlang and his men. Speaking up to this point, Suyong was already in tears. Commander Su Quan is also dead. White Knight County was about to be breached, but then Shinlang's army of over 10,000 suddenly attacked from the rear, directly leading to the near annihilation of our forces. Snowbright City also fell under Jing Tuo's siege. Lord Suzhan also narrowly escaped death, leading the remaining 3,000 depleted troops back to the castle. We were utterly defeated in the Battle of White Knight County. After speaking, Suyong slumped to his knees in dejection, and at this moment, Sunan, after hearing this news, was completely stunned, as if struck by lightning. After a moment of silence, he only felt a fire burning in his chest, a metallic taste in his throat. Then, a sharp pain came. A mouthful of blood instantly spurted out. The next second, his vision went black, and he fell straight to the ground. More than half an hour later, Sunan, amidst intermittent sobs, slowly regained consciousness. When he turned his head to look, in his blurry vision, he saw a dense crowd kneeling before his bed, the sound of their tearful wails piercing his eardrums. He forced himself to sit up, frowned, and angrily shouted, I'm not dead yet. Why are you all crying like it's my funeral in front of my my bed. This angry shout was like a clap of thunder, causing the roomful of cries to abruptly cease. Everyone was first stunned, then tears of joyful surprise welled up in their eyes. Their invincible master was all right. The Su family was saved. Su Nan rubbed his forehead to clear his head, then stood up and said to everyone, "Everyone, leave first. My Su family is not so easily destroyed." After speaking, he looked at Su Yong and Su Zhan beside him. "You two stay and follow me to the study." A moment later, in the study, Su Nan sat in the Grand Tutor chair and slowly began to ask, "Tell me, what exactly happened with the Chan Kingdom?" Su Zhan replied with a bitter smile, "It's still unclear. Even now, we haven't received any definite news from our spies, and that Su seems to have been captured. We only know that an avalanche occurred on the snowy mountain." Hearing this, Su Nan sighed deeply. "Arutai is probably dead, killed by that little bastard Shinlang." After a pause, he continued to ask, "What about the avalanche on Great Snow Mountain?" Su Yong replied, "When Arutai led his army up the mountain, an earthquake suddenly occurred. An entire face of the snowy mountain cascaded down like a waterfall, directly burying tens of thousands of Chan soldiers under the snow." Hearing this, Su Nan couldn't help but gasp. This avalanche was definitely not as simple as being caused by an earthquake. It must be Shinlang. He can actually utilize the power of heaven and earth. How on earth did he do it? Now that Arunana has become the new Chan king, even a super general like Shibutai has surrendered to her, and my Su clan's main army is also gone. What should we do next? After some thought, he suddenly looked up and asked, "Su Yong, how many troops does my Su clan have left now?" Su Yong replied, "Approximately, still 5,000 troops." As soon as this number was spoken, Su Nan's heart suddenly felt a sharp pain, as if struck by a heavy blow. Only 5,000 troops left? At its peak, my Su clan had a full army of over 40,000. I never expected. Shinlang, you actually took only half a month to make me fall from heaven to hell. Just as this thought crossed his mind, the sharp pain in his heart struck again, making him almost unable to stand. Su Yong and Su Zhan, seeing this, hurriedly tried to support him, but he waved them away. "No need to support me. I'm fine." After speaking, he took a deep breath, calmed his emotions, and gritted his teeth, saying, "How on earth did my Su clan offend this plague god Shinlang? If it weren't for him, my Su clan's army would have long since merged with the Chan kingdom and swept across the entire western celestial province." Shinlang, the Jin family. At this moment, Su Nan suddenly remembered something. Someone had sent a secret letter back then, claiming that the Jin family had not destroyed the secret letter from old Marquis Su Jian, soliciting the Jin family to defect to Ning Yuanwu. To even prove the matter true, they had recited the contents of the letter verbatim. Originally, at that time, he trusted the Jin family very much, but once this incident occurred, it made him feel utterly horrified. One must know that if this letter were exposed, his entire Su family would face annihilation. It was from that moment on that he concluded the Jin family harbored ill intentions towards the Su family, and that's why he repeatedly tried to harm the Jin family. But looking at it now, the Jin family did indeed burn that letter. But who was it, and why did they leak this information to him? Su Nan shook his head. Now was not the time to delve into this matter. The most important thing right now is how the Su family can survive this crisis. No matter how you look at the current situation, it's already a desperate one. At this moment, Su Yong stepped forward and said, "My lord, our castle was built over hundreds of years, perched atop a cliff. The only mountain path is also equipped with 3 dangerous passes. It is surrounded by cliffs on all sides, making it impossible for the enemy to lay siege." Su Nan nodded after hearing this. "That's true. We have ample provisions and an inexhaustible water supply here. With 5,000 defenders, we can hold out for several years without issue. But what if the enemy only surrounds us and doesn't attack? Ning Yuanxian only needs to send troops to sweep through my Su clan's territory, occupy the entire White Knight County. At that time, even if we have 3 years worth of provisions, what good will it do? If we only expend resources without replenishment, then our Su family will become water without a source. What use is there in us guarding this castle?" As soon as these words were spoken, the study fell into a deathly silence. Su Nan continued, "When the momentum is with us, a strong castle is like adding wings to a tiger. But when the momentum is lost, everything here will be useless. Just like the pirate king Qiu Tianwei, that supposedly impregnable castle, wasn't it eventually captured? Speaking of which, Su Nan closed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he suddenly opened his eyes and ordered, "Abandon the castle in the shortest possible time. Lead the entire clan to evacuate the Yu Kingdom, cross the Chan Kingdom, and enter the western regions." Upon this order, Su Yong and the other man were instantly shocked. They hurriedly knelt and pleaded, "My lord, please reconsider. This is the Su family's foundation of hundreds of years. The castle is incredibly strong. With our protection, we can definitely survive this crisis. But if we rashly travel far to the western regions, I'm afraid it will be a journey of 9 deaths and 1 life." Su Nan shook his head and said, "We can't hold it. Once we are trapped in this castle, it means all our territories have fallen. At that time, people's hearts will surely be in disarray, and it will naturally fall without a fight." And inside the castle, hearing this, Su Yong hurriedly stepped forward and said anxiously, "My lord, the army of our Su family will definitely be loyal to you." "Absolutely not." Just as he reached this point, Su Nan interrupted him. "Impossible. There is no such thing as an absolutely loyal army enemy in the world. When they see no hope, their hearts will change. That will be the true death knell for our Su family. However, the 100-year foundation of my Su family is this territory at the foot of the mountain, not this castle. When victorious, this castle is a royal palace. But when we are defeated, this place is a prison. We absolutely must not imprison ourselves here. Jumping out of this cage is our only chance of survival. Hearing these words, Soo-young gritted his teeth and kowtowed. Whatever the master says, goes. Wherever you go, your subordinate vows to follow you to the death. Your subordinate vows to follow the master to the death. After a pause, he continued to ask, why don't we go to the Chu kingdom? The western regions are barbarian lands. If the master goes there, I'm afraid you will be looked down upon. But if we defect to the Chu kingdom, with the master's ability, you will surely be infected as a marquis and appointed as a general. Sunan shook his head. Precisely because the Chu kingdom is of the same ethnicity as us. If I lead my army to defect to Chu, although I will be infected as a marquis, the subsequent price will be the piecemeal destruction of our army's branches. Those generals of our Su family will have no burden in switching their allegiance to other powerful figures, and by that time, the Su family will also be completely disintegrated. But if we go to the western regions, it will be different. That place is a motley collection of peoples, still in a chaotic state, which is suitable for our survival now. Moreover, the people there are all of other races. Precisely because of the multitude of different ethnic groups, our Su family soldiers will stick closely together. Those not of our race must have different hearts. This way, they won't be easily bought over. This truthful statement from Su Nan instantly enlightened the two of them as if they had been jolted awake. Then Su-young continued to ask, my lord, will we return after going to the western regions? Return? Of course, we must return, Su Nan said, gritting his teeth. Within 10 years, my Su family will definitely make a comeback. And with Ning Yuanxian's obstinate and self-willed personality, who knows when he might bring about his own destruction. The third prince and the crown prince are also vying for succession, and there's also that noble Lord Jin of the southern Ouyang kingdom, who is equally not easy to deal with. The Yu kingdom won't be peaceful for much longer. Hearing this, Su-young was puzzled. My lord, the kings of Wu and you have now deployed 200,000 troops on the border, mutually deterring each other, and the Chu kingdom in the west is also fighting fiercely with the Zhong clan. Under these circumstances, we can totally survive amidst the chaos. Fool, Su Nan roared angrily. Those Chu and Wu kingdoms are just putting on a show. They will never actually fight. The only real major battle for Chu is at Furious Tide City. Now that we, the main characters, are about to exit the stage, how can they continue this play? Alright, no need to say more. While the enemy hasn't reacted yet, immediately abandon the castle. Hurry up and pack your things. Except for a few children from the direct lineage, all other old, weak, women, and children are to be abandoned. Remember, this matter must be kept secret. You are just setting out on a normal expedition. Leave at dawn, not a moment's delay. Upon this order, the two men were stunned for a moment, then still accepted the military command. They both understood in their hearts that the master was doing this to preserve the Su family and had to cut off the tail to survive. And after Su Nan said these words, he also sat down weakly in the chair. After exhaling, he said, we don't have much time left. If I'm not mistaken, Jing Tua and Lian Yongyan, those two old dogs who kick a man when he's down, will soon lead their troops to attack. They will then wait in the rear for us to suffer heavy losses on both sides, and finally reap the rewards. However, Shinlang, you can be as conceited as you like, because only then can we escape under your negligence. But suddenly, a flash of inspiration struck him, and he then asked, Su Zhan, do we still have any of the smallpox poison we stored earlier? Su Zhan was taken aback, then hurriedly replied, there's still a lot left. Hearing this, a cold smile appeared on Su Nan's lips. Very good. Then put this poison into the well water and grain. Jing Tua, Lian Yongyan, since this smallpox can't harm Shinlang, then use it on your armies. Let them taste hell. Early the next morning, the Su clan's remaining 5,000 troops poured out, leaving the distant guard city lord's mansion. Although Su Zhan announced to the public that it was an expedition, this matter still caused considerable unrest among the populace. An unsettling atmosphere permeated the entire street. Just as everyone was discussing animatedly, someone suddenly looked up and shouted, Family head. The family head is still on the city tower. The family head will not abandon us. The sudden shout finally quelled the commotion slightly. However, more than 2 hours later, Su Nan, disguised as a common soldier, also quietly rode his horse and left the castle through a secret passage. All the direct descendants and troops of the Su family successfully escaped like a cicada shedding its golden shell, rushing towards the western regions, and the people in the castle were completely abandoned. This time, Shinlang, due to a momentary oversight, allowed Su Nan to escape, just as the defeated Su Nan, with his remaining 5,000 troops, fled the Yu kingdom to seek refuge in the western regions. Shinlang, far away in White Knight County, was, as Su Nan had predicted, basking in the joy of victory. At this moment, he was feeling quite elated. For him, to be able to force Su Nan into a desperate situation, successfully break away from Jing Tua and Lian Yongyan, and then induce the two to proactively attack the Marquis of Distant Guard's mansion. Now all he needed to do was sit back and watch the tigers fight from behind, reaping the benefits. This feeling of being in control of the overall situation was truly exhilarating. However, As the saying goes, those involved are confused, while onlookers are clear. Zhang Chong, still recuperating as a seasoned general, through his keen intuition, sensed a hint of abnormality with the Su clan. He then sought out Shinlang, under the pretext of wanting a game of chess, and invited him over. A moment later, Shinlang stepped into the room. Seeing Zhang Chong sitting propped up on the couch, he said with a light smile, "Lord Zhang, your injuries haven't healed yet, and you still want to play chess with me? If you lose, don't blame me." Hearing this, Zhang Chong smiled without speaking, merely motioning for Shinlang to set up the chessboard. Once the game began, Zhang Chong suddenly said, "Young Master Shin, when you resolutely abandoned Olive Gold Mountain and Cliff Watch Island back then, could such a decisive act be considered a hero breaking his own wrist, making a painful but necessary sacrifice?" Hearing this, Shinlang shrugged and said, "Not really. Furious Tide City itself was our main target. If we couldn't resolve the new policy crisis, what use would Olive Gold Mountain be to my Gene family? Only by jumping out of this muddy water, establishing Furious Tide City as our base and standing across the sea, could we completely sever the noose of the new policy." Speaking of which, Shinlang seemed to have suddenly figured something out. His expression instantly changed drastically. "This is bad. That old scoundrel Su Nan is going to run." He then complained, "Lord Zhang, why didn't you tell me about such a crucial detail directly? Why did you have to beat around the bush?" After saying that, he was about to rush out the door. At this moment, Zhang Chong spoke again. "I just didn't dare to arbitrarily confirm my own thoughts, so I could only try to guide your state of mind, to let you make a judgment based on instinct. After all, young Master Shin, you are the kind of person who takes one step and sees 3 steps ahead. I believe you will definitely find a way to deal with it." Hearing this, Shinlang was stunned. Was Lord Zhang reminding him to stay calm and not make mistakes due to haste? Thinking of this, Shinlang immediately stopped in his tracks, closed his eyes and focused his mind, putting himself in Su Nan's situation. "If I were that old scoundrel, what would I do next? The Marquis of Distant Guard's castle is impregnable. Even if 30,000 troops came to attack, it would be difficult to breach. But once the Su clan loses its fiefdom, loses White Knight County, then this castle will instead become a prison." Although Su Nan is a wise man, his flaw is greed. He clearly held a good hand, but because he tried to achieve 3 goals with 1 arrow, he ended up in defeat. So, in the current situation, he will definitely flee, and he will definitely not go to the Chu Kingdom to live under someone else's roof. Only by choosing to flee far to the western regions, accumulating strength to await a future comeback. Analyzing to this point, Shinlang was instantly filled with regret. He had truly gotten carried away this time, fantasizing about reaping benefits without effort. How is this different from Su Nan's greed? If Zhang Chong hadn't awakened him in time, this time he would have missed a great opportunity and made a huge mistake. Thinking of this, he turned and bowed to Zhang Chong, saying, "Thank you for your reminder, Lord Zhang. I know what to do. I'll take my leave for today." After speaking, he no longer tarried, hurriedly gathered that 10,000-strong army, and pursued westward. At this moment, Shinlang only hoped that everything could still be rectified. This time, he absolutely could not let that old scoundrel Su Nan escape again. The scene changes to Furious Tide City. Wu Mu, leading an army of 30,000, had been battling the Jin family defenders in the main castle for several days. Although the number of Wu Mu's fierce generals far exceeded the Jin families by 6 times, they still failed to breach this impregnable city. At this moment, Wu Mu stood before the central army tent, gazing at the smoke-filled battlefield. Although his heart ached for the 7,000 soldiers lost, his eyes still revealed a ruthless determination for victory. The Jin family has also lost 2,000 men now. As long as my Wu Kingdom's wheel tactics don't stop, let's see how long they can hold out. Suddenly, his gaze was drawn to a red silhouette atop the city wall. It's Jean Mulan. This woman is truly formidable. She can actually command battles continuously on the battlefield for 5 days and 5 nights without rest. Her tenacity and decisiveness far surpass ordinary generals. How many women in the world can achieve this? And Wu Yu, beside him, just stared intently at the city wall ahead, muttering incessantly, "Jean Shuring, why haven't you made your move yet? Are you deceiving me?" Wu Mu glanced at her, then said, "Don't be anxious. He simply hasn't had the chance to make a move yet." This Jean Mulan has been on the battlefield continuously without rest, and as the top fierce general, Jean Shuring can only stay by her side at all times, fighting alongside her. If I had doubts about Jean Shuring before, his actions now actually convince me that he has truly defected. So right now, we need to keep attacking the castle to create an opportunity for him. As long as Jean Mulan can't hold on, Jean Shuring can become the overall commander. At that time, he will open the city gates, and we can easily enter the castle. Hearing this, Wu Yu subconsciously caressed her still flat abdomen, her gaze fixed firmly on the city wall. "Jean Shuring, I believe you will definitely not let me down. Even if not for me, you must do it for our child in my womb." And next, Wu Mu's army exerted all its strength, attacking the city day and night. Until the 8th day, both sides seemed to have reached their limits. Wu Mu suddenly announced a temporary ceasefire to rest and reorganize. The moment this order was given, the 2 armies inside and outside the castle simultaneously collapsed. Some soldiers were even so tired that they could no longer grip their weapons. And Jean Mulan, as the commander-in-chief, feared Wu Mu might be feigning, so she forced herself to endure her fatigue seemingly staying on the city wall observing the battle for 4 hours. It wasn't until nightfall, when Mulan saw no movement from the other side, that she finally felt at ease and handed over the defense authority to Jin Zhiying. However, not long after Jin Mulan left, news reached Wu Mu's camp. Jin Zhiying sent a signal. He had successfully taken over the defense authority of the castle. Hearing this, a flash of ecstasy crossed Wu Mu's eyes. Finally, this moment has come. My 6,000 elite troops. It's time for them to be committed to the battlefield. He stood up directly and walked out of the tent. Wu Yu, behind him, couldn't help but ask, Commander, Jin Zhiying will be on our side, right? Wu Mu, who had just walked out of the camp, stopped, sighed, and replied, don't worry, Jin Zhiying is a smart man. No one wants to be subservient to others for a lifetime. I believe he will definitely not disappoint you. Just then, a frontline soldier came to report, Commander, the castle gates have opened. Hearing this news, Wu Mu was so excited his whole body trembled. Jin Zhiying, it wasn't in vain that I invested so much effort in you. You truly didn't disappoint me. Immediately after, he ordered the 6,000 elite troops to assemble before the camp, then raised his battle saber and shouted, the time to achieve merits and establish a career is now. Attack the castle. Take Furious Tide City. Following Wu Mu's order, these 6,000 black-clad elite soldiers, like a black tide, silently rushed into the main castle of Furious Tide City. Little did they know that Jin Zhiying, atop the city wall, was coldly watching all of this. At this moment, his eyes were cold as he watched the rushing Wu Kingdom elite troops and sneered, my lord, young Master Shin, this good show of catching turtles in a jar should begin. Don't worry, I will definitely not disappoint you both. No one would have thought that Jin Zhiying's betrayal was actually a meticulously planned scheme by Shinlang, a stratagem of catching the turtle in the jar. Shinlang had long anticipated that the Wu Kingdom, in attacking Furious Tide City, would inevitably exploit the Jin family's fatal flaw, the mythical turtle marquis's trusted confidant, his adopted son, Jin Zhiying. Little did they know that in Shinlang's heart, there was simply no such thing as absolute loyalty in the world. When the stakes for betrayal outweigh those for loyalty, almost no one can resist the temptation. Of course, the stakes mentioned here do not simply refer to money and power, but also life and emotions. Jin Zhiying was adopted by his father-in-law, Jin Zhua, since childhood. His food, clothing, and expenses were almost no different from a biological son. His values were also very uprightly educated. It could even be said that he never had any desire to overstep for money or power. Therefore, if one wanted to win over Jin Zhiying, there was only one way: use a woman to sway his emotions. This stubborn fellow had a crush on Mulan for many years, and even at the age of 30, he had not shifted his affections. Therefore, when Mulan chose to marry Shinlang, he was, in a sense, heartbroken, and the best way to cure a broken heart is to start a new relationship. If the enemy grasped this weakness, the consequences would be very serious. And I, Shinlang, how could I possibly leave such a serious flaw for the enemy to exploit? Thus, a test designed to temper Jin Zhiying's will began. Shinlang started arranging for different types of women to approach him in turns. They pretended to be decoys sent by the enemy, testing his limits time and time again. For the emotionally naive Jin Zhiying, repeated emotional shocks could make him increasingly calm and resolute. Only in this way could he avoid being easily exploited by those with ulterior motives. Although this method of testing might seem somewhat cruel, and Jin Zhiying was kept in the dark throughout, compared to being turned by the enemy and ending up deserted by everyone, such an arrangement actually became the most secure way to protect him. At this moment, in Wu Mu's camp, Wu Yu asked with a worried expression, Commander, I don't know if it's my illusion, but I always feel that this battle is progressing far too smoothly. 6,000 elite troops attacking the city by night, but even if they wore grass-soled shoes to muffle sound, and used the cover of night, given the Jin family's usual vigilance, it's impossible that they wouldn't have noticed the army approaching. Wu Mu stood up and smiled, because the one opening the city gate is Jin Zhiying. He is familiar with the intervals of the city defense rotations. Our soldiers advanced to the city along the moat, with him providing cover. The Jin family defenders naturally found it difficult to detect them. Wu Yu nodded after hearing this. The commander's words are reasonable. It's me who has been too suspicious. Just then, alarm sounds rose one after another from within Furious Tide City's castle. Enemy attack. The enemy has entered the castle. Prepare to engage. As the sounds of fighting erupted from the castle opposite, Wu Mu finally let out a long sigh of relief. The defending forces in the Jin family's castle are less than 3,000, and they are all extremely fatigued. Now that my 6,000 elite troops have all entered the city, the Jin family's demise is only a matter of time. Before his voice faded, a messenger rushed in. Commander, the castle gates suddenly closed. Wu Mu's heart lurched violently. Since Wu Lian has already led his troops into the city, why close the city gate? Is he trying to trap and annihilate the enemy, or has he encountered a mishap? At this moment, Wu Mu was caught in a dilemma. Should he trust Wu Lian's 6,000 elite troops to defeat the enemy alone, or should he send reinforcements? Those soldiers who had fought fiercely for days were already exhausted. If reinforcements were sent hastily, could they hold up? After weighing the pros and cons repeatedly, he still decided to prioritize stability. He turned his head and ordered his adjutant, Lian Zhan, Tan Xiong, you two immediately lead 4,000 troops into the castle to support Wu Lian. You must take the entire castle within half an hour and annihilate the Jin family's army. Watching the grand deployment of the army, Wu Mu was brimming with confidence. With 10,000 troops against 3,000 remnants, taking Furious Tide City would be as easy as turning over his hand. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Jean Mulan, holding a long sword, commanded sternly, "There's a traitor in the army. Leave 200 men to defend the city walls. The rest, follow me into the main castle hall to set up defenses." However, a quarter of an hour later, Jin Shiring, leading 10,000 Wu troops, cornered Mulan and her soldiers on the training ground. At this time, on the Wu army's side, Jin Shiring turned to Wu Lian and said, "General, Jin Mulan is right opposite us. Right now, as long as we capture her, the remaining forces of the Jin family will surely surrender. At that time, the battle for Furious Tide City will be completely over." Hearing this, a ruthless glint flashed in Wu Lian's eyes. He immediately ordered loudly, "All troops, form ranks, surround the Jin family remnants." With this order given, 10,000 Wu troops formed layers of encirclement, instantly forcing Mulan and her soldiers back to the entrance of the training ground. Then Wu Lian shouted loudly, "Miss Jin Mulan, do not make any more futile resistance. The Jin family's demise is already a foregone conclusion. It's better to surrender early, and I can still spare your life." As his voice fell, Mulan's eyes instantly turned cold. She said icily, "If you want my Jin family to surrender, you can just die with that thought. I, Jin Mulan, as the commander-in-chief of the Jin family's army, vow to live as long as the city stands, and die if the city falls." Hearing this, a mocking smile played on Wu Lian's lips. "You're at death's door, yet you still talk so boldly. Since you're all in such a hurry to die, then I'll grant your wish," he then ordered. As the battle cries of the soldiers behind him rang out, Jin Shiring hurriedly stepped forward to stop him. "General Wu, please wait. Allow me to go in and persuade them to surrender." "All right?" Wu Lian was stunned, then said sarcastically, "You want to personally persuade them to surrender? Aren't you afraid that you, a traitor, will be torn to pieces by them?" Jin Shiring showed a look of sorrow and replied, "Even if I die, I cannot bear to watch the Jin family's last remaining troops all be killed." His pretentious act made Wu Lian despise him even more in his heart. A traitor who sold out his master for personal gain, even at this point, still putting on a show of loyalty to his former master. Truly ridiculous. It's good if this fellow dies. If he dies, there will be one less person to compete with him for a position beside the commander-in-chief. Thinking of this, he directly agreed to Jin Shiring's request. Having received permission, Jin Shiring turned, and while walking, tried to persuade Mulan, "Miss Mulan, we have thoroughly lost this battle. If we can surrender, the Jin family can still retain its last bit of strength. Let the remaining troops return to the mythical Turtle City fiefdom, all right?" Hearing these words, Wu Lian sneered inwardly again. "Let them go back? In your dreams, Jin Mulan's fate will only be to have her martial arts crippled, and then she will be sent to the Crown Prince of Yu Kingdom. The remaining troops will all be slaughtered." At this moment, Mulan's angry voice was heard. "Jin Shiring, you traitor, you still dare to come back? You're simply seeking death." Hearing this, Jin Shiring, with a look of heartbreak, persuaded, "Miss Mulan, every word I say comes from the bottom of my heart. As long as the Jin family surrenders, I will have no complaints whether you want to kill me or spare me." Mulan sharply interrupted him. "Seize this traitor. Take him back to the castle to await judgment." As her voice fell, two soldiers immediately stepped forward, seized Jin Shiring, and escorted him back to the castle. The moment the main gate closed, Wu Lian couldn't help but laugh wildly. "Jin Mulan, you are truly ridiculous. Could it be that you intend to use this thin door to block my 10,000 strong army? Simply wishful thinking. Jin Mulan, I'll count to 5. If you still refuse to open the gate and surrender, I will lead my army to slaughter my way in. At that time, all of you will die." After speaking, he began to count down. 4. When he counted to 1, Wu Lian shouted loudly, "All troops, hear my command." Following Wu Lian's order, tens of thousands of Wu troops, like a black tide, charged towards the main castle gate. Just as they were about to reach the gate, countless sandbags were suddenly thrown from the top of the wall. The moment the sandbags hit the ground, they burst open, and the lime and dust that billowed up rose to the sky, choking the Wu troops, causing their eyes to water and their ranks to fall into disarray. Just when everyone thought this was poison thrown down by the Jin family, a soldier suddenly smelled a familiar scent in the dust. When he mustered the courage to lick his lips, he recognized the taste and his expression changed drastically. Then he hurriedly shouted to Wu Lian, "General, this isn't poison. This seems to be wheat flour." Hearing this, Wu Lian also hurriedly bent down and scooped up a handful, sniffing it before his nose. It was indeed the scent of fresh, dry wheat. He looked up in disbelief at the white dust drifting in the air. Is Jin Mulan crazy? Does she intend to use this pervasive wheat flour to obstruct our offensive vision? Watching the countless flour bags crashing down from above the city wall, the entire military field was now shrouded in white. Seeing this, Wu Lian immediately ordered, "All troops, hear my command. Use your headscarves to cover your mouths and noses." A leader of 1,000 households beside him also drew his saber and raised his arm, shouting, "Soldiers, follow me to breach the main hall. Annihilate the Jin family remnants." However, just as they began to charge, the throwing of wheat flour from the top of the city wall also stopped. Then, in the next second, hundreds of flaming arrows streaked across the sky, whistling as they came. Wu Lian's pupils constricted upon Mulan seeing this. Before he could react, the instant the flaming arrows came into contact with the wheat flour, an earth-shattering explosion occurred. Searing airwaves, wrapped in scorching flames, in an instant sent tens of thousands of Wu troops flying. At this moment, witnessing the tragic scene on the training ground, of course, since this explosion occurred in an open, non-enclosed space, not many people were killed by the blast. Most people were only severely injured by the explosion, but this kind of pain made them wish they were dead. Deafness caused by ruptured eardrums, blindness caused by burns to the eyes, and the burns all over their bodies made them unable to live or die in excruciating pain. A moment later, Wu Lian struggled to get up from the ground, but what met his eyes was a field full of blood. His ears were filled with the heart-wrenching wails of the wounded soldiers. This tragic scene made his face instantly turn pale as paper. In a panic, he looked towards the main castle hall, at the wooden shutter that had been blasted into a twisted shape. It was now completely empty inside. Jin Mulan, Jin Shiriying, and where did those Jin family remnants go? It turned out, Shinlang had, much earlier, ordered a secret chamber to be dug beneath this hall. When the massive explosion occurred, Mulan led her soldiers into the underground shelter, perfectly avoiding this deadly crisis. It wasn't until this moment that Wu Lian knew they had been tricked by the Jin family. At this moment, an overwhelming sense of powerlessness made him collapse heavily to the ground. It was all a conspiracy. Jin Shiriying's betrayal was fake. Your Jin family did it entirely to lure our Wu Kingdom's main force into the castle, and then wipe us out in one fell swoop. At this time, Mulan walked out from the underground secret chamber, and then ordered the soldiers behind her, kill everyone on the ground who can still move. Over 2,000 Jin family soldiers, upon receiving the order, pounced on the enemy soldiers like fierce tigers. With flashes of sabers, more than 3,000 wounded Wu Kingdom soldiers instantly became souls under the blade. Then Mulan ordered again, stop. The remaining wounded soldiers have lost their ability to fight. Spare their lives. Tie them up and take them as prisoners. Jin Shiriying was slightly taken aback upon hearing this. Logically, these enemy troops should indeed be eradicated, but since Miss ordered not to kill, it's highly likely it was young Master Shin's idea. Perhaps these wounded soldiers are still of some use to young Master Shin. Time rewinds to before the great explosion. At this moment, Wu Mu's camp was filled with the aroma of wine. Wu Mu and Wu Yu were leisurely drinking wine and playing chess, enthusiastically discussing how to arrange the wedding of Wu Yu and Jin Shiriying after the war. However, just as he was feeling, a loud bang exploded, and the ground of the entire military camp trembled violently. At this moment, Wu Mu and the other person's expressions changed drastically. They stumbled out of the camp, but then they were stunned by what they saw before them. At this moment, explosions were occurring one after another in the distant main castle. The sky, illuminated by the raging fire, had already lit up half the horizon. It wasn't until this moment that Wu Mu realized they had fallen into a trap. Everything Jin Shiriying did was an act, all to make them voluntarily fall into the trap they had set. But what puzzled him even more was this explosion. The Jin family, where did they get such powerful weapons? And Wu Yu, behind him, was also deathly pale, her eyes fixed on the burning castle, repeatedly muttering, Jin Shiriying, you lied to me. You lied to me. The next second, she only felt her vision go black, her legs go weak, and she collapsed to the ground unconscious. And on the other side, Shinlang's Chan Kingdom cavalry unit was still frantically pursuing Su Nan's army. While resting along the way, he received intelligence that Su Nan had already fled the Yu Kingdom. At this moment, Shinlang felt extremely guilty. Su Nan's cavalry had escaped 2 days ahead, now at least 400 li ahead of them. At the current speed, there was absolutely no possibility of catching up. Once the enemy entered the western regions 3 days later, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven to capture that old scoundrel. No, I absolutely cannot let Su Nan escape, nor can I give him the chance to make a comeback a few years later. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration struck his mind, as if he had thought of some crucial information. He then stood up and ordered, all troops, listen to my command. Immediately turn around, change course and continue south to pursue. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone immediately showed a look of surprise. Wu Lai stepped forward and asked doubtfully, young Master Shin, Su Nan clearly fled westward. Aren't we going in the opposite direction by heading south? Shinlang shook his head. Direct pursuit is no longer a viable option. We can only make a detour south to set up an ambush ahead of them. Hearing this, Wu Lai became even more confused. But we can't even catch up by chasing directly. Wouldn't going in a circle make the distance even greater? Seeing this, Shinlang patiently continued to explain, you are mistaken. If we continue to tail them, Su Nan will surely flee day and night. But if we move south, feigning to give up, when his scouts discover the pursuing troops have disappeared, the news relayed will definitely make him lower his guard. And on their way to the western regions, they will definitely pass by the Chan King's palace. There lies a large amount of gold plundered by successive Chan Kings. Su Nan is currently short of money. His lowered guard will make him greedy, and the Chan King's palace is almost unguarded at this time. It would be extremely easy for him to seize this gold. Therefore, he will absolutely not be willing to give up this piece of fat meat. Speaking up to this point, Shinlang paused, and then continued, go and relay my orders. Immediately divide the troops into 2 groups. Have 2,000 soldiers feign an attack on the Marquis of Distant Guard's mansion mansion to create a diversion. The remaining 8,000 troops will enter the Chang Kingdom under the cover of night. We must not let Su Nan's scouts discover us. If my calculations are correct, in 4 days, we will be able to have the final battle with Su Nan at the Chang King's palace. Time moves to the morning of the second day after Wu Mu's elite army was trapped in Furious Tide City's castle. After experiencing the defeat of the previous night, early this morning, Wu Mu gathered the remaining 10,000 plus Wu troops, as well as Chiu Hao's 5,000 pirates, preparing to launch an all-out attack on the Jin family. However, just as Wu Mu was boosting morale with his back to the castle, the entire Wu army suddenly let out a collective gasp of astonishment. Wu Mu, seeing this, instinctively turned to look behind him. At this moment, he saw Jin Mulan and Jin Shuring leading several thousand elite soldiers onto the city wall. At the same time, behind them, followed a figure both blurry and familiar. At this moment, a pirate suddenly shouted in terror, that person, isn't that Jin Zhua?" Hearing this, Wu Mu looked closely and was instantly aghast. How is this possible? The news from various spies has already confirmed it. Jin Zhua is dead. At this moment, Wu Mu, overcome with anger and anxiety, only felt his vision go black, and he almost fainted. The soldiers on the city wall, led by Jin Zhua, just then formed a line and then simultaneously threw down an object resembling a sphere. After a large number of spherical objects landed, the Wu soldiers at the front discovered in horror, "They are all the heads of our soldiers that the Jin family threw down from the city." The messenger, seeing this, hurriedly returned to the rear to report, "General, and General Wu Lian's head is among them." And, after hearing the messenger's words, at this moment, Wu Mu was instantly trembling with anger. One must know that Wu Lian was his most loyal and trusted general. Just then, Jin Shuring's voice suddenly came from above the castle. "The 10,000 troops you sent into the city have been completely annihilated. Wu Mu, these 3,000 heads below are a warning to you. If you stubbornly refuse to surrender, then these remaining 7,000 captives will all be buried with you." Hearing these words, Wu Mu's forehead instantly bulged with veins. His eyes were almost spitting fire. At this moment, he wished he could swallow Jin Shuring alive. Suddenly, a mournful cry came from behind. The grief-stricken Wu rushed out shouting, "Jin Shuring, why did you deceive me?" Wu Mu's heart tightened upon seeing this. He hurriedly stepped forward to stop her and persuaded, "Wu Yu, calm down. Acting like this will only make the Jin family look down on us. Do you understand?" And at this moment, Jin Shuring, standing on the city wall, his gaze was as cold as frost. All traces of past affection were gone. It was as if this woman, with whom he had once been intimate, had no connection to him whatsoever. After Wu Mu's personal guards helped the emotionally collapsed Wu Yu back to the tent, he stood in place, took a deep breath, and forced himself to calm down. Then he sneered towards the castle, "Mythical turtle Marquis, everyone says you are upright. Looking at it now, that's not entirely true." Hearing this, Jin Zhua snorted coldly and replied, "Wu Mu, you are mistaken. I am merely upright, but not foolish. Now that things have come to this, are you still going to continue fighting us?" Hearing this, Wu Mu fell silent. He looked at the 2,000 elite soldiers on the city wall, standing ready. Their armor glinted coldly in the sunlight. He knew clearly that he could no longer take this impregnable castle. Adding to that, he had lost 10,000 main force troops the night before. The only thing he could probably do next was to besiege the castle and wait for reinforcements. Just then, Jin Zhua, who had not received an answer for a long time, shouted again, "Wu Mu, don't you want these 7,000 captives I have here? They have suffered extensive burns from the explosions. If you hesitate any longer, they might miss the optimal treatment period. In a few days, they will all be dead." Such words struck Wu Mu's heart like a heavy hammer. These were all his elite, direct subordinates who had followed him for years. How could he not want them? If they were injured, they could still be treated. Even if there was only a breath left, he absolutely could not give up. But how could Jin Zhua be so kind? What price did he really want him to pay? Indeed, just as Wu Mu had expected, Jin Zhua suddenly spoke, "Wu Mu, if you want to take these captives back, then let's make a deal. Use one person's head to exchange for these 7,000 people." Hearing this, although Wu Mu didn't reply, Chiu Hao, beside him, his face changed drastically. How could he not understand that the person Jin Zhua was referring to was none other than himself? "Don't hesitate any longer." Then Jin Zhua said sternly, "As long as you take Chiu Hao's head, I will immediately open the city and return these 70 wounded soldiers to you." As soon as these words were spoken, Chiu Hao was instantly aghast. He turned directly and ordered, "All hands, board the ships, retreat to Skywind Island." Wu Mu, seeing this, also panicked. He hurriedly stepped forward to stop him. "General Jinhai, please stay. Rest assured, I, Wu Mu, am definitely not the kind of person who breaks promises and betrays trust." Before he finished speaking, Wu Mu's army behind him had already caught up. Chiu Hao was greatly alarmed, violently drew his saber and roared, "General Wu, watch your troops. If they take another step closer, we will have no choice but to resort to arms." Seeing that Chiu Hao's pirates had all assumed defensive formations, to eliminate Chiu Hao's misunderstanding of himself, Wu Mu could only wave his hand to signal his troops to halt. Then he walked forward alone and said, "General Chiu, don't fall for the Jin family's scheme to sow discord. How about this? The western castle of Furious Tide City, where you are stationed, will still be under your command, and I will lead my troops to garrison the eastern castle. Our two forces will form a pincer formation, continuing to besiege the the Jin family's main fortress. The battle for Furious Tide City is not yet at a desperate point. I will immediately write to request reinforcements. Do you think this is feasible? Hearing this, Chiu Hao's eyes flickered, quite tempted by Wu Mu's proposal. Just as he was about to compromise, laughter suddenly came from the city wall, and Zaiqian laughed. Chiu Hao, you are too naive. Wu Mu can't take Furious Tide City, so he wants you to stay here and tie down my Jin family. And he, on the other hand, will settle for second best and go seize your Skywind Island. After all, the Wu Kingdom has mobilized such a large force. How could they return empty-handed? As soon as these words were spoken, Chiu Hao, who was already suspicious by nature, his heart's alarm bells instantly rang loudly. That's right. The Wu Kingdom has paid such a heavy price. How could they give up so easily? Since the overall situation in Furious Tide City is settled, they will definitely set their sights on my Skywind Island. Thinking of this, Chiu Hao no longer hesitated. He turned and shouted, "All hands, board the ships. Retreat from Furious Tide City." Behind him, Wu Mu chased a few steps, persuading, "General Chiu, please stay. The Jin family members are clearly sowing discord. The Count's title bestowed by His Majesty. Are you going to give it up?" Hearing this, Chiu Hao paused, then turned his head and sneered, "Of course, I want the Count's title, but I also need to be alive to enjoy it. These days, everything is fake. Only territory and the army in hand are real." After speaking, he led his 5,000 pirates away from Furious Tide City without looking back. Watching Chiu Hao's army depart, Wu Mu was practically bursting with rage. "Chiu Hao, you are such a fool. Don't you even think carefully? As the commander-in-chief, how could I possibly start internal strife with you at this critical moment? Besides, my target has always been Furious Tide City, the entire Thunderous Archipelago. If I can't get Furious Tide City, your Skywind Island is of absolutely no value to my Wu Kingdom." At this point, a nearby general hesitated and spoke, "Commander, are we still going to continue the attack?" Hearing this, Wu Mu only felt his temples throbbing. Originally, relying on Chiu Hao's army for assistance, they only needed to divide their forces for defense and wait quietly for reinforcements. But now, with the departure of Chiu Hao's army, they even lost the crucial command of the sea. Not only did it turn the siege plan into a pipe dream, in fact, only their 12,000 soldiers remained. At this moment, trapped here, Wu Kingdom reinforcements would take at least a month and a half to arrive. Would their provisions last until then? Could it be that they would have to plunder the merchants of Furious Tide City? But such an action would undoubtedly push these neutral merchants completely towards the Jin family. In the future, there would be no room for reconciliation. At this moment, Wu Mu racked his brains, but couldn't think of a perfect plan at all. Finally, exhausted mentally and physically, he could no longer bear the anxiety in his heart, then collapsed heavily to the ground. He only felt his vision go black. In the Battle of Furious Tide City, the Wu Kingdom's army was utterly defeated. On the sea, Commander Wu Mu, with his remaining 12,000 troops, fled Furious Tide City like a stray dog. He stood dejectedly on the deck of the warship, watching the gradually receding main castle of Furious Tide City, his heart filled with mixed emotions. Just half a day ago, his adjutant beside him told him that during his coma, the Jin family, using some unknown means, had managed to set fire to the granaries in the camp, directly causing them to lose 70% of their already scarce provisions. And the 7,000 wounded soldiers who were sent back, their injuries were also exceptionally severe, and the medical supplies in the camp were insufficient. If they didn't return for treatment soon, those wounded soldiers would surely die. Actually, if one carefully analyzed the details, the reason Jinj was so easily released these captives was clearly to use these wounded soldiers to drag down their entire army. Thinking of this, Wu Mu couldn't help but smile self-deprecatingly, recalling more than half a month ago when he led an army of 30,000 south in a grand and imposing manner, how majestic and awe-inspiring it was. And now, he was scurrying away from the island like a defeated dog, in a sorry state. Looking back at everything he had done before, it seemed like a joke. This disastrous defeat not only ruined his official career, but also trampled His Majesty's prestige firmly into the mud. Those conservative old ministers in the court would definitely take this opportunity to attack His Majesty en masse. Thinking of this, Wu Mu felt as if his heart was being pierced by a knife. Finally, he could no longer control his emotions, knelt on the ground and cried out in anguish, "I have failed your trust. My crime deserves 10,000 deaths." Under this overwhelming grief and indignation, Wu Mu only felt a metallic taste rise in his throat. He violently spat out a mouthful of blood. Then he fainted on the deck, unconscious. The scene shifts to within the Chan Kingdom's borders. To this day, it has been the 8th day since the Su clan fled the Yu Kingdom en masse. At this time, Su Nan and his party were less than 1,300 li from the western regions. To ensure safe entry into the western regions, Su Nan had continuously dispatched scouts for days to meticulously investigate the movements within a 100 li radius. At noon, scouts from all directions successively returned to report. No ambush was found ahead. No pursuing troops were seen within 100 li behind either. Hearing these reports, Su Nan's tense nerves finally relaxed. The entire Su clan was finally out of danger. After this, neither Jing Tuan nor Shinlang would likely be able to catch up with them. Fortunately, I decisively withdrew back then, leading the entire clan to flee overnight. Otherwise, at this moment, my Su clan would would probably have been besieged in the castle by tens of thousands of troops, with no chance of breaking the deadlock. Just then, Soo-young came forward with a grave expression to report, "My lord, the army's morale is very low right now. Everyone seems to have guessed that we are fleeing the Yu Kingdom. Many soldiers are complaining privately, unwilling to leave their hometowns." Hearing this, Soo-nan snorted coldly. "Once we reach the western regions, they will have no choice. The exclusion by foreign tribes will instead make them rely on me more, and they will also serve me more devotedly." At this moment, Soo-jan suddenly suggested, "Why don't we first distribute some gold coins to the soldiers to stabilize their morale?" As soon as these words were spoken, Soo-young, beside him, shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that won't work. According to statistics, we now only have a little over 400,000 gold coins left." Hearing this, Soo-nan's expression changed drastically. "How come there's so little left?" Soo-young explained helplessly, "In this war, the monk soldiers from the Great Calamity Temple and the western region's mercenaries we hired already cost a huge sum. To rope in the Cham Kingdom to send troops to White Knight County, Urutai made exorbitant demands, taking away nearly half of the Su clan's wealth. With such daily expenses like flowing water, our savings are almost depleted." Soo-nan fell silent. Currently, there were still 5,000 troops following him that needed to be stabilized. After arriving in the western regions, they wouldn't be able to use military force either, so they could only rely on financial resources to pave the way. But this sum of over 400,000 gold coins was simply a drop in the bucket. Just as he was in a difficult situation, Soo-young suddenly said, "My lord, do you remember the Cham King's palace made of gold? That old Cham King Aragang loved to show off his wealth the most, casting all the gold he had plundered for decades onto his royal palace. The dome, the floor tiles, all made of gold, converted to gold coins. It would be at least 2 million. As soon as these words were spoken, Soo-nan was instantly caught in a dilemma. Based on his understanding of Aragang and his son, how could he not know that there was a large amount of gold in the Cham King's palace? But he knew even better that his own greed was exactly the same as Aragang's. Once he stepped into that golden cage, whether he could escape unscathed was highly uncertain. He reconsidered, "If I can obtain this wealth, when I go to the western regions, I can at least shorten the struggle by 2 or 3 years. He was already 60 years old. These 2 or 3 years, how precious they were to him. Just as Soo-nan was repeatedly weighing the pros and cons, Soo-jan urged anxiously, "Elder brother, let's go rob it. With this gold, the brothers below will no longer have any complaints." Soo-young also chimed in, "Yes, my lord. If we can take this huge sum to the Suwa Kingdom, we can quickly develop in the western regions, and the king of the Suwa Kingdom will most likely directly appoint you as a provincial governor." Soo-nan, after hearing this, thought long and hard, finally gritted his teeth and said, "We cannot go to the Cham Kingdom. No matter how tempting the gold in the Cham King's palace is, it's not worth more than our lives. We have rested long enough. All troops, listen to my command. Set out immediately and continue west." Hearing this, Soo-young and Soo-jan exchanged a glance. Even though they were unwilling, they could only cup their fists and accept the order. However, a moment later, Soo-young came forward with a worried expression to report, "My lord, the soldiers are unwilling to continue forward." Soo-nan was furious upon hearing this, and shouted sternly, "Are they trying to disobey military orders?" Soo-young said with difficulty, "Many of the brothers also know about the gold in the Cham King's palace. They all want to take the gold before leaving." Hearing this, Soo-nan's face turned grim. He strode towards the army. The soldiers, who were discussing in low voices, upon seeing Soo-nan, all knelt down and paid their respects. A few daring soldiers even spoke directly, "My lord, we are willing to follow you to the western regions to the death. But right now, all the brothers' pockets are empty, and the millions of gold coins in the Cham King's palace are only 200 li away. How can we just let it go? Please, my lord, grant us permission to go and seize it." The brothers promise, "After obtaining this gold, we will only take 1/10 of it and offer the rest entirely to you, my lord, to help you achieve your great cause." After speaking, these 5,000 private troops all bowed down to Soo-nan. This almost coercive situation made Soo-nan instantly burn with anger, but the already wavering balance in his heart completely tilted at this moment. Since the army's heart has moved, if he forcibly orders them to go west now, I'm afraid this elite private army that has followed him for many years will disintegrate in an instant. Helplessly, he could only compromise. Then he shouted sternly, "All troops, hear my command. Head south to the Cham King's palace. You must seize all the gold in the Cham King's palace with the fastest speed." As soon as this order was given, the originally low morale instantly soared, and cheers erupted. Then they changed direction and charged towards the Cham King's palace. At this moment, the Cham King's palace was already fraught with hidden dangers. Wu Lai, following Shinlang's secret order, under the pretext that the new queen's ascension required purifying the palace of filth, applied a poisonous solution, brushing it all over the palace. Through everyone's concerted efforts, in just one day, the entire palace was given a new look. The palace gleamed with golden light, this trap woven with poison and gold, waiting for the armies to march in.